Hello and welcome back to the Arcane Forge. My name's Josh and today we're going to be talking about how to roll up a character in D&D. Remember, if you like this video or if you find it useful, make sure to give a little click on the thumbs up button over there on the right hand side. Leave a comment if you can. Make sure to share this with anyone who you think might find it useful. We're a new channel ourselves, only level 1 YouTubers at this point, so all of that really helps us out. With that out of the way, let's start the video. So like I said, today we're going to talk about how to roll up a character in D&D, specifically in 5th edition D&D, although some of the skills that we'll cover in this can be useful in other games too. So to start off with, we're going to need your player's handbook, and you can either use the character sheet in the back of the book there, or you can download one and print it out just as I have here. There'll be a link in the annotation below. Some dice, a bit of scratch paper on the side, and a pen to make notes with. The character sheet comes in 3 parts. You've got your main sheet on the front there, you've got your second sheet for a bit of extra information, and the third sheet is kind of optional if you end up being a spellcasting class. Now, I didn't quite know what class I wanted to play this time, so I decided that I wanted to open up the book on this page here at the beginning of the classes section, which has all the classes listed out there, and I'll go ahead and pick one at random by rolling a dice. If you want to make an even more informed decision about what class you want to pick, I'm going to make a separate video on each of the classes and go through them in detail. But for now, we'll go with Druid. If you already know what class you'd like to play, just make sure to turn to that page in the book, and we'll get started. Next up, it's time to choose what species, what race we want to be as we go through this. And I think we're going to go for an elf this time. I like the sound of being an elf. If we're going to be a druid, we're going to be very nature magic based. Let's go for a wood elf as well. So I write my class and my species at the top right hand side of the character sheet there, where there's a little section for them. And some people like to do this last, but I like to do it first. I'm going to name my character, get to know them a little bit as we go through before we start finding out what they can do. If you're stuck for names and you can't think of one yourself, hopefully the player's handbook has some example names for each species. If you're not a fan of them, you can go on fantasynamegenerator.com. I'll leave a link down below. Or you might find it easier to come up with a name after you've fleshed out the character a bit more. But for now, it looks like we're Kaelin Amakir, choosing from the female names there. So we're going to be a lady druid. Next up, it's time to roll some stats. This is where the idea of rolling a character comes from. Now you'll notice that on the left-hand side of the page there, we have a few attributes. We have Constitution, Strength, Dexterity, Wisdom, Intelligence, Charisma, and those are going to be our stats. We're going to find out what those mean for this character. And there are 2 main ways of doing this. Both of them involve rolling dice. The first one is a little bit tricky. You roll a d20, 20-sided dice, and whatever it lands on is your stat. Now that leads to some very, very wild characters, people with very high and extremely low values. It's quite rare to get a kind of balanced character out of that one. It can be really exciting and fun though, so I recommend that for a kind of throwaway game, but maybe not for a long campaign. You really want to live through a story. Make sure to check with your group which one of the 2 options they want to use though, because it's best if everyone uses the same system. It feels a bit more harmonious that way and more fair. So the second option is what we're going to do. You'll notice that I draw out a graph here with 6 slots, 1 for each of the attributes, but I've written them on the notes on the side here because we're not going to do them in any particular order. We're going to pick which ones are best for us. For this method, we're going to get 4 d6s, 4 6-sided dice, and we're going to roll them for each of the stats. Once we've rolled all 4, we're going to take the lowest one away, add up the remaining 3, and that's what our stat is. So one stat here is a 10, that's dead average. The normal, average, everyday human being in a D&D world would have 10 for every single one of their stats. But an adventurer like you is likely going to have something a little bit more than that in a few of these fields, because you're a hero, why not? Next up we get a 15, that's much better. And 18! Okay, that's the best we can possibly get with this system. It gives you a chance to get a full 20 some point later on in your leveling up system, but for now that's really, really good. A 14, this is shaping up to be pretty nice. Okay, and a 6. They're going to be really below average at something. But we wouldn't want to be boring and play someone completely superheroic anyway. Let's have a nice 3-dimensional character. Up next we get another 15. Cool, Kaylin is shaping up to be extremely powerful. So now it's time to kind of pick where we think each of these stats should go into our various attributes. If we turn back to the Druid page, we can figure out which stats are going to be most useful for our fighting class. So according to the book, Druids are spellcasters. It's going to be a really big feature of being a Druid. And it looks like Wisdom is the stat that they use to cast those spells. That's not always the case. Wizards, for example, use Intelligence. Some other classes use Charisma. So make sure to just check that in your class to make sure before you put any stats down. Either way, that tells me that we want our Wisdom to be our highest stat there, so we're going to pick the 18. We're going to use a 15 for Constitution there, our second highest stat. Constitution is general survivability, basically, in a nutshell, so that's useful for absolutely everybody. Next up, we're going to put our other 15 in Dexterity. Dexterity deals with nimbleness and the ability to avoid things. Seems pretty useful for a wood elf, someone who might live in a forest, might need to scale the odd tree here or there. We'll put our 14 in Intelligence. You know what, we're a smart person, we know how to cast spells. We'll put our 10 in Charisma there because, you know what, we live a solitary life maybe. We live in the woods, we're a druid. We're not unpleasant to talk to, but we might not have all the social graces of someone who lives in a big city, so just normal. Which leaves the dreaded 6 to go into Strength. But you know what, we're a druid, maybe we don't want to carry too much, maybe we don't like worldly possessions too much, and hey, druids can later transform into other animals, so maybe something a bit stronger if we want to be a bit tougher. Now up next we need to go back to our species page, our race page, because being an elf gives us certain advantages. Increases these stats a little bit. Now every race has different stats that they increase your abilities by. For us, it looks like Dexterity is increased by 2 points, just for being an elf. And then for choosing a wood elf, our Wisdom increases by 1 more. So we're actually starting off with a 19. Now it's time to put those stats in their respective slots on our character sheet. They're nailed in now, locked in there. And there are some little spheres, little circles, just beneath our stats there. And that's where we put in our bonus numbers. So what are bonus numbers? They're numbers that you add to dice rolls related to each skill that can mean you do better or worse in something. These are called ability score modifiers, and that's just it. They modify scores when you roll a dice. Now if you want to work those out yourself, take away 10 from your ability score and divide the result by 2, rounding downwards. Or if, like me, you don't like maths at all, just turn to page 13 of your player's handbook, and there's a little table in the top right hand corner there that tells you exactly what all of your scores mean. Nice and easy. So it looks like our 6 there is a -2, 2 less than average, so whenever we roll a dice we're going to take 2 away from the result. Our 15 in Dexterity is a +2, same goes for Constitution. Intelligence tucks itself neatly away into that +2 category as well. Our whopping 19 Wisdom means that we get a +4 every time we use something Wisdom based. And our 10 there is a +0. Nice and average. Up next we're going to pop a 2 in the section there that says proficiency bonus. And I've not pulled that out of thin air, don't worry. Everyone starts off with the proficiency bonus of 2, and in later levels that number increases. We don't need to really worry about that now because I'm going to do a full video on how to roll skill checks and things like that involve proficiency bonuses. All you need to know for now is that you've got one. Turning back to our race page, we can learn a little bit more about what being a wood elf gives us. So we can choose our alignment next. If you know about alignments already, you can pick whatever you'd like. Again, I'm going to do a video on those. But if we want to fit the fantasy of being an elf, the player's handbook suggests that we pick some kind of chaotic alignment. So we're going to do that. We're going to go chaotic good, because we're a good guy. We also learn about our height, which seems not too far off a human height. So we'll go ahead and make Kaylin 5'7". Now there's a weight section there as well. We can go with whatever we like, but I like to imagine elves being almost weightless. I remember a scene from The Lord of the Rings, seeing Legolas walking on top of the snow while the rest of the party, the rest of the fellowship, wade through it. He wasn't even leaving footprints behind, so unnaturally light. So we're going to go with 7 stone. They can obviously be whatever weight you feel is sensible. Getting to know her even better, we can pick her eye colour. So we're going to go for Hazel. She's a druid, she's into nature, so let's go with some browns and greens. And I always imagine wood elves having slightly tanned or darker coloured skin. So let's say that she has tan skin and black hair. So what else do we get for being an elf? Well, we get dark vision. We're used to living in twilight-lit forests, so we can see pretty damn well up to 60 feet, even in the dark. Our long ears aren't just for show. We get proficiency in perception checks. And once a long time ago, we were related to fairies, to the Fae. So their magical blood in our veins means that we have advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic can't force us to go to sleep. On the nature of sleeping, we also get trance. Elves don't need to sleep like humans do. They're apparently above it, so they can choose instead to meditate for a few hours, gaining all the benefits that a human might do in 8 hours of sleep. Will be super productive and can maybe keep an eye out if the party decides to camp somewhere dangerous. We can maybe get 4 hours of meditation in and then keep watch for the rest of the 4 that the humans need to sleep for. In terms of languages, we know Common and Elvish. Common is the language that all people know in D&D. Everybody needs to be able to communicate, and Elvish is a bit more of a floral, bit more of an elegant language that only elves seem to know. And I jumped the gun a little bit here by picking our sub-race in advance. So we already know that we get the wisdom score increase for being a wood elf. Elves being our kind of Legolas style character, get proficiency in a few weapons. We're good with long bows and short bows, and we're good with short swords and long swords. Now we also have fleet of foot. We're very quick, so our base walking speed is 35 feet for being a wood elf. Usually that's 30 feet for a standard creature, so if you don't know or your character sheet doesn't say anything about it, it should, but if it doesn't for some reason, then you move at 30 feet. We're nice and swift. We also get something called Mask of the Wild, which is a really cool ability, and it means that we can hide, basically, in natural environments. Even if there's just a little bit of foliage, some heavy rain, some snow, things like that, we can just disappear. We can basically vanish into natural phenomenon. That's all we know about our character based on their race. Now we can find out a bit more based on their class. So the first thing that we learn is that our hit dice is a D8. And basically all that means for us is when we level up, that's how many hit points we have. Hit points are your survivability. And they range from a D6 to a D10. So we're nice and comfortable in the middle in a D8. And when you're starting off a character, you automatically get the maximum amount of hit points that you can possibly have at level 1. So we get 8 to start off with, but we also get to add our constitution modifier there, which is a +2. So we get 10 hit points to start off with, which means we can take 10 damage before we fall unconscious. Next up, we're proficient in yet more weapons for being a druid. Druids will never wield metal weapons or wear metal armor. They like to be nice and natural, so basically anything that's related to wood we can use pretty well. As compensation for not using anything metallic, we're good at clubs, we get proficiency in daggers, darts, javelins, maces, quarterstaffs, scimitars, sickles, slings, and spears. Try saying that twice as quickly. We're proficient in light armor, medium armor, and we can use shields as well. And that's not always the case. Different classes have different levels of armor. Barbarians, monks, wizards, and sorcerers don't generally tend to like to wear any armor. They wear just clothes. If you like to cast spells, it's pretty hard to do so waving your hands around all the time if you're wearing huge chunks of metal armor. But we're quite comfortable even casting spells in light armor, wrapping a few plates onto ourselves for example, or in medium armor, which is usually made of leather. Again, we're quite natural, we rely on the land a lot as a druid, so those are probably like bear pelts, cured leather, hide, all this kind of stuff. It'll give us a bit of extra protection. We also learn that we are skilled with a herbalism kit, in case we want to brew any potions, pick any herbs, identify any berries, and so on and so forth. And our saving throws are intelligence and wisdom. Good thing we put a few points in intelligence as well. See the saving throws section just beneath the proficiency bonus up there on the left hand side. And again, I'll talk about what saving throws are in another video, but for now you just need to know that you have proficiency in those, so when you roll those saving throws, you get to add your proficiency bonus to intelligence and wisdom ones. And on the proficiencies are just our ability modifier that's relevant to it. For example, intelligence, there is a +2, and our proficiency bonus is a 2 as well, so that makes a 4. Our wisdom is a 4, and we get to add our proficiency bonus to that as well, so that's a 6. Now we get to learn a couple of skills. So I think animal handling is going to be pretty useful. That seems to come off of wisdom as well, so we get a nice +6 in that. Going to meet a lot of animals as a druid, I imagine. And nature. Obviously we've got to love a bit of nature. And that's an intelligence-based skill. Now we get some equipment to start off with, just for picking this class. All classes get a few different choices that they get to make. And our first choice is between a wooden shield and any simple weapon. Now it's unusual that a spellcasting class gets to wield a shield, so I'm going to pick that. And shields give you +2 to your armor class. We'll talk about armor class in a second, but it just makes you more sturdy, so why not? Then we get a choice between a scimitar and any simple melee weapon. Now I'm going to pick a scimitar here, as most weapons use strength to hit things with, and our strength is pretty rubbish. But a scimitar is what's called a finesse weapon, which means we can use dexterity to hit things. It's nice and nimble, just like us. So we can hit things with our dexterity instead, which we're much better at, so I'm going to pick that. Next up we get some leather armor. We also get an explorer's pack and a druidic focus. Now a druidic focus is what we use to cast spells. It's just a little something in the game that means we don't have to carry around a huge equipment pouch filled with ingredients to cast spells. We can channel magical energy through it. And it can look pretty much like whatever you want it to. It could be like a crown of antlers, just like the picture on the page there, or a bead, or a berry, a stick, a wand, whatever you like. Usually the idea is that you have to, wielding it in some way, have it in your hand in order to cast a spell, so you're not sort of running around with firing magic out the end of a sword and so on and so forth, even though that would be pretty badass. But hey, you got one, so there we go. Wizards and sorcerers and paladins and clerics and all this kind of stuff have their own version of a druidic focus, some kind of spellcasting focus, so make sure to check that out on your class page if you're picking a different class than a druid. And turning to the armor page, we can see exactly what leather armor gives us, because we're given some of that, we're wearing that apparently. And that gives us an armor class. An armor class is the number that a creature has to roll to hit if they're trying to attack us. Again, I'll go through this more thoroughly in another video, but basically the higher that number is, more safe we are. Now leather armor is not the best armor in the world, but it is pretty good. It just gives us 11 protection, but it allows us to dodge around and be very flexible. It's not weighing us down like some heavy plate armor. So we can add our dexterity modifier to the armor class that leather just gives us. So that gives us 11 plus 3 for dexterity, which is 14 overall. So we can pop that in the armor class box at the very top. And I'm going to put a little slash here and make a note of 16, because when we're using our shield it gives us +2 armor class. So when we're not using a shield we have 14 armor class, when we are using our shield we have a 16 armor class. Got to make sure we have a hand free to use it though. Next up I just want to check how much damage our scimitar does, because we're using it very frequently. I'm going to put that in the attack section, just in the middle there, for quick references. I can always rummage through the book if I want to, but why not make it easier and have it right in the middle of the page here. So, every time we hit something with our scimitar, it deals 1d6 damage, plus our strength or dexterity modifier. Because again, it's a finesse weapon, so we get to choose, but I'm definitely going to pick dexterity, because we have a +3 in it. So, it does 1d6 plus 3 damage every time we hit something. When we're trying to hit with something, we also roll our dexterity to roll to hit. Because we're proficient in scimitars, we get to add our proficiency bonus, so it's our dexterity modifier plus our proficiency bonus, so 3 plus 2 is 5. Just going to write that in the middle there so we don't ever have to do that maths on the fly, it's just sitting there waiting for us. So up next we get some spells. As mentioned before, wisdom is what we use to cast spells, and it looks like to start off with we get 2 cantrips, which are spells that we can do whenever we want to. They're usually little ones, but we can use them as frequently as we like. Turning to the back of the Druid spells list, in the back of the book, we can see exactly what we can pick as cantrips. Because you don't get to pick everything, they're usually themed around your class. So I'm going to have a nice thorough read of what all the different cantrips that I'm able to cast can do. And I'm going to pick Druidcraft, which is a harmless spell. It's very nondescript. You can basically do something magical related to nature. It describes it very thoroughly in there, but things like shutting a door, blowing out a fire, making a plant grow here and there, making a small light, things like that. I'm also going to pick Shillelagh, which if I have a mundane weapon in my hand, which I usually will do, I'll have my scimitar there, I can make it magical, I can make it do a little bit more damage. Certain creatures can only be harmed by magical weapons. Mundane or normal weapons as they're called basically won't do the trick, so having Shillelagh on hand means that I'll always have something to hurt something if I need to. Now we get a few other spells, and these are much more potent. These are called first level spells, and again I'll talk about how to cast spells, what different spell levels mean and stuff like that in another video, but we're a level 1 character which means we can only cast level 1 spells. Now, I only have 2 spell slots as a druid at first level, which means I can cast 2 of these spells between resting. It takes a lot of energy to cast a spell, so I need a bit of a break sometimes, but I can cast 2 between rests. You may know more or fewer as a first level character of whatever class you pick, so make sure to consult the table for your class. In terms of the spells that I know, they're going to be a lot more than that. So characters that cast using wisdom are usually using some sort of divine magic. They're using the magic of their gods. In the druid's case, that's probably like pantheistic. They believe that nature is a living, breathing force, and it's empowering them. And the druid, a lot like a few other classes like that, have access to all of their spells. Most classes only know a couple that they've learned, but druids technically have access to all of the spells in their spells list that are first level to start off with. And what you do is, you sit down during a long rest, and you can prepare a few of them, i.e. you get to pick what kinds you might want to choose from between rests, and you get to pick a number, which is your wisdom modifier, plus your druid level. So we're level 1, and our wisdom is plus 4, so we get to know and prepare 5 of them at any given time. Your class might be massively different, but for us, we know an awful lot of spells, we can prepare 5 of them at a time, and we have just enough magical energy in us to cast 2 of those 5 spells when we so choose between rests. I'm going to go back to the druid spell list and take a look at some of those spells and pick which 5 I think I'm going to use really frequently and just write them down here. So everybody with a spell casting ability of some kind has to find out their spell save difficulty and their spell attack modifier. Their spell save difficulty is basically if you create some kind of trap or something that someone has to dodge out of the way of. All of that has a difficulty rating, just you for making a check. We have to work out what your one is. Again, I'll go through this more thoroughly in another video, but basically what it means for us right now is that we need to do some maths. So your spell save difficulty is 8 plus your proficiency bonus, which for us right now is 2, plus your wisdom modifier is plus 4. So that gives us a grand total of 14. And then we need to do our spell attack modifier. And just like I said earlier, we chose the scimitar because we can use dexterity to hit things with it, because our dexterity is much higher than our strength. Well, we'd ideally choose to hit things with our wisdom score, wouldn't we, if we could, because that's a plus 4. And thankfully, as a druid, that's exactly what happens when we hit someone with a spell. We get to use our wisdom modifier plus our proficiency bonus. 4 plus 2 becomes 6. Now again, those numbers will definitely change based on what your casting ability is. Again, wizards use intelligence, some use charisma, all that kind of stuff. But for us, it's wisdom, and that's how we work it out. On top of that, we also know Druidic, which is a kind of language. Rogues get something super similar to this as well. They get Thieves' Cant. But for us, Druidic is very much like, if you've seen The Hobbit, when Gandalf inscribes a rune that indicates to all the dwarves that they should be able to come here and start their adventure. Druidic's a lot like that. You could place stones in a certain way, leave a carving somewhere, whatever you want to do, but it's a communication that all druids share, and anything else that knows Druidic, that another druid's been through that area, which they can then read. We also get proficiency in that herbalism kit that we just added to our character. Now that's everything that we get for our class for choosing the druid. So when you're done noting down everything that you get for picking your first level character in your class page, let's move towards the back of the book here and look at backgrounds. Now again, you can pick whatever background you like for your character. Make it entirely up to you. Discuss it with your DM, invent something new and interesting. Or you can pick one of the backgrounds from the back of the book here. And I'd recommend doing a bit of both, kind of inventing your own fluff, your own history, but maybe picking one of the backgrounds here because they give you certain advantages, they give you certain skills, maybe some languages and some gold. We're going to have a spool through here. Think about which background best suits the character that we're building up here, what Kaelin Amakir feels like she suits the best. And I think we're going to go with the Hermit. That seems to suit her really well. It explains why she's got a kind of normal level of conversational skills there through charisma. She maybe hasn't lived among people very much. She's just kind of average at it. Maybe dips in and out of towns. So let's go with that. And this background, just like all backgrounds, will give us a few things. It'll give us a personality trait, an ideal, a bond, and a flaw. And those are things just to help you kind of roleplay. So as a hermit, we get proficiency in medicine and religion, which suits us very well. We've probably had to learn how to tend to our own wounds while we've been living alone. And certainly if our religion is that of nature. We've lived in it. That certainly helps us out a bit there as well. Maybe we're a bit of a scholar. I think the idea is maybe you're a monk or something like that, someone who has tried to push themselves away from society, so we gain proficiency in that as well. We also learn the tool proficiency of the herbalism kit, which thankfully we've already got, but if we didn't, we'd get it here. We learn an extra language. I'm going to put Orcish down here, but you might want to pick something that's more relevant to your setting, if there is something. I kind of imagine that a hermit, someone who's been isolated for a while, might have come across the natural creatures in the darkness. Orcs certainly seem to be a fairly common one in most settings, so let's go with Orcish. Maybe she can read some Orcish writing if she finds it, or communicate with them, bargain with them, so she's not in so much trouble being alone. We also get some equipment. We get a scroll case, stuff full of notes that we've made. We get a winter jacket, because it gets cold out there. A set of common clothes, in case we do need to venture back into town. And a herbalism kit. And 5 gold. Not very much gold at all, but then, we don't work in a city. How much money could we make, Certainly if we're not that interested in money at all. The background that you pick will give you similar stuff, just to give you an extra bit of flavour. And then we have all these tables, and you can either pick whichever ones suit you the best, or you can randomly roll. I'm going to randomly roll, just because again, you're going to see who Kaelin turns out to be, rather than me picking. So as a hermit, we get 1 extra table to roll on here than we usually do for our background. We've lived a life of solitude, and we kind of want to find out why. Why have we done that? So we're going to roll on the table, and find out why we've hidden ourselves away. Turns out that we were the caretaker of an ancient ruin. So maybe we've got some kind of tie to that place, maybe it's important to us, maybe we don't want to spend too far away from it, or maybe some sort of magic that conjured itself up there asked us to go into the world and get something for it, and that's why we're an adventurer. Who knows? Maybe a bunch of orcs, something like that, claimed the ruin that we are supposed to be a caretaker of, and instead of trying to run hopelessly into battle and get ourselves killed, we've decided to find a party of people who are going to help us take it back. We have to earn their trust first, and that's why we're doing an adventurer. So I'm super rolling the wrong dice here. But it's okay, we're picking randomly, and this isn't super important. This is just for an extra bit of flavour. So we'll just go with our result anyway. And our personality trait that we get is that we feel tremendous empathy for all who suffer. It's a nice trait, and can be really good for role-playing as well. I mean, obviously it explains why you might want to be, or lean towards being a healer as a druid. If they suffer, you might want to help them out, but also could cause some interesting complications in fights. Maybe you don't want to cause any more suffering, so maybe your character's a bit more of a pacifist and won't actually engage in cutting things' heads off or maiming them. Maybe they'll draw the line at a taunt, who knows? But it's for you to roleplay. Up next, I realise that I've got the wrong die, but it's fine. Again, it's a bond. We'll just go with it. The numerical value is not super important because we can just pick anyway, but picking the right dice, we learn that Kaelin is maybe a little bit power hungry too. She doesn't want to cause anyone to suffer, but her ideal, and a lot of people use the expression worldview now instead of ideal, but her ideal is that solitude and contemplation are paths towards power. So maybe that's why she isolated herself. Maybe she sought out this place of power that she was supposed to be guarding, and that connection to nature is how she learned all of her druidic magics. Kind of backed her up and made her think that solitude is the only way to get power, or at least the best way, and so perhaps she's going to be a little bit wary of other travellers and other players when she meets them, but maybe she really needs them, so who knows, but she's probably going to prefer solitude if she thinks it brings her power. Up next in terms of bonds, we learn that her isolation taught her insight into a great evil, so maybe that's why she's leaving this place. Because she's learned of this great evil and she knows she has to do something to stop it, and she is bound to that evil. It's a quest for her. It's a motivating force. Up next we have a flaw. We have flaw number 5. And we learn that she's a little bit careless. She's a little bit knowledge hungry. She'd risk a little bit too much to uncover a lost bit of knowledge or lore. So Kaelin's story is already taking shape as a result of that. We know that she spent a lot of time guarding an ancient relic or ruin because she thought maybe it would grant her some power, and it did. She became a first level druid, taught her how to harness natural magic. While she was guarding this ruin and gaining this power, she learned of a great evil, horrible threat, and because she feels empathy for all who might suffer from it, she decided that she would risk leaving the only place of power that she belongs to. She would risk a little bit too much. She would leave her precious solitude in search of the knowledge, the lost knowledge, that might teach her how to defeat this evil. On the way, she's bound to find the rest of her adventuring party, the other players, and their characters. So let's see what happens. So, a couple of final little details here. For an extra bit of fluff, we get to roll on the trinkets table. Now, trinkets don't generally tend to do anything, but they might be important to your character. They might be a sentimental thing, or they might have relevance to the story later on. Your DM might write them in to the story. Maybe something you've been carrying around for absolutely ages is really useful. So we're going to roll a d100, which is 2 d10s, one operating as the 10s, one operating as the units, and find out what treasure we have with us when we start. It can be really good, can be really bad. Doesn't generally tend to count for any monetary value, but it can be useful, or at least interesting. Turns out what Kaylin Amakir values as treasure is a pair of old socks. Well, it's hardly a legendary battle axe or something, but it could be useful to her. It could be maybe the pair of socks that she's worn every single winter so that her toes wouldn't freeze off. It could be a pair of socks belonging to a long-lost love that she abandoned in order to find this ancient ruin that she's a caretaker of. It could be a pair of socks belonging to an old mentor who taught her some magic, someone who tragically died at the hands of this evil that she's destined to eradicate. She keeps their socks for sentimental value. It's the only thing left of them after they got disintegrated. Or it could even be a pair of old socks that used to belong to this horrible evil person, and she's just hoping that she can learn how to wild shape to transform into animals soon, so that she can turn into a wolf and track down their scent. Who knows? But we got some old socks. Now your DM might want to give you a little bit of gold to start off with now, but that's up to them. I think as a hermit we're going to leave it like that. We only have 5 gold to our name. We don't really need it, we don't really want it. But if you do get some gold now, then you can use it to buy things from the equipment list. And now that we've built up a clear picture of who Kaylin Amakir, the wood elf druid, is, we can maybe draw her too and get a view of who she actually is. Until next time, I'll see you later. Hopefully you'll get enough experience to level up quickly. And if you want to help this channel level up as well, make sure to like this video and share it with someone who might find this useful.